Hello and welcome to the Grim Tutors, your one-stop shop for all things Magic the Gathering. I'm Colton, also known as Pez.
And I'm Oblivion. So, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about mulligans, and we're joined by a very handsome guest.
Ooh, which handsome guest is it?
You should know them. They are Dan.
Hello.
Hey everybody, what's up, Grim Tutors?
What is up, moderately anonymous?
Not too much. I am very excited to come here and talk with y'all about my favorite thing in Magic the Gathering.
Mulligans is your favorite thing?
Yes, if I have said this many times that if I could play games of Magic the Gathering that were only the mulligans, I would do it.
I'd be curious to see how that actually would go.
I don't know how you would determine who the winner is.
Oh, okay. It's just the sluttiness.
I love the
of,
gamble of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like what could it be?
All right.
So I guess the first thing that we should probably talk about, if we're going to talk about mulligans, is what is that? What does that mean?
So mulligans in Magic are like when you shuffle and take your 7. If you shuffle again and take another 7, that is your mulligan. Essentially, like same thing as like in golfing, taking another shot at essentially your opening hand.
Ooh, okay. All right. So you just get to draw them, and if you're like, that seems stinky, you just put them back and try again.
Yeah, there are a lot of different rules for the mulligans in Magic that have existed over the span of the entire 30 years. The first one was called All or No Lands, very aptly named because you could reveal your opening hand, and if it had all lands or no lands in it, you were allowed to mulligan that one and take another 7. And I think otherwise you were not allowed to mulligan.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I'm remembering less sternly on the second part, but Pez seems to agree.
Even if that turns out to be incorrect, that still seems pretty wild. And also,
it seems pretty
probable.
Fitting for Wizards back in the day.
Look, if it's
game
all
design
lands,
was in its infancy.
Yes, exactly. Damage used to go on the stack. It was the Wild West.
Why?
Why is a great question.
No wonder people think Magic is hard. That's crazy.
Yes, that is unnecessarily complicated. I think many things in Magic's infancy were unnecessarily complicated. That mulligan rule, though, kind of unnecessarily simple when you think about it. We've definitely come a long way since then. The current rule is the London Mulligan rule, where every time you look at your opening hand, you get to take a look at a full 7. If you don't like that one, you can shuffle it and put it back, and then you can draw up to 7 again. And you are going to put 1 card on the bottom of your library for each time you have mulliganed during the game. So if you mulligan once, you're keeping a hand of 6, and you can do that all the way down to 0 if you want to.
So every time you mulligan, you're going to draw a full hand, and then you can look at that and assess your choices from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, as opposed to the previous mulligan rule, which was the Vancouver mulligan rule, where if you were going to take a look at your first hand, you don't like it, put it back. The second time, you only draw 6 lands, or 6 cards off the top of your deck, and then you got to scry off the top once you were done. Scry that many times, as many times as you have mulliganed off the top once you're done keeping. Yeah.
I think this current way is better, and it's called a London mulligan.
Yes, because it was officially introduced in PT London or something.
Is there a difference in the rules around mulliganing, if that's the proper plural, depending on what format you're playing?
To the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong. I think EDH is the only one that has a different mulligan rule than the normal one. Like, I don't know enough about Canadian Highlander, though, or something like that. But in EDH, you get 1 free 7, so you can take a look at 7 cards, and then you get to mulligan once and not have any hindrance of having to put cards back on bottom. Other than that, everyone abides by the normal amount.
Got it. So you only get like a free second 7 in Commander.
Right.
1v1 formats, you're going straight to 6.
Yep.
Yes, and even in CEDH, which has surprised many of the people I've introduced to CEDH, they're like, "Oh, you still get a second 7?" It's like, yeah, it's just the rules of EDH.
I was very curious as to why people said second 7, because once I learned like what mulligans were and why you would take them, I was definitely going straight to 6, like a champion.
Yes, many people do, because that's normally how you play Magic in almost every instance.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be bad at something, you may as well just like do it king mode, right?
Yeah.
We've determined what a mulligan is and the rules around it, but why would you want to do that? Like, what's so wrong with just ripping the top 7 and saying go?
It depends on what format you're talking about. In Limited, for instance, a hand that has the colors of lands that you need in your deck, and like a coherent curve of just like 2 to 3 to 4 drop, as long as like the math and colors make sense, that's a keepable hand. Very different than, say, if you were playing CDH, which is hyper aggressively mulligans. My claim to fame is that I've won CDH games on both a Multa 2 and a Multa 1 before, because in CDH, you're really looking for very specific things and you're looking for an explosive start. In most cases, you're just looking for playable things. I was thinking about this question actually before we started, because there's definitely a huge gap in why you would want to mulligan between casual EDH and CDH. I think EDH is very close to the same sort of mentality as limited, or in many other constructed formats, where as long as your hand is coherent and capable of casting the spells that are in it, that's fine enough. I think the reason that you would want to mulligan in casual EDH, if you are a casual EDH player, which I would suppose that most people getting into Magic these days are, the reason that you would want to is to reduce the amount of non-games that you are playing. And what I mean when I say non-games is a game where you either can't cast your spells, or you never draw your lands, or you never draw the right colors of spells, and you just basically play a game where you don't get to play as much Magic as other people. Mulligans are there to prevent that. Like, you don't want to, I see many EDH players keep a hand based on, well, if I draw a land, or if I draw a 3-drop, this hand is fine, and otherwise it's not good. If you can say otherwise this hand is not good, just mulligan it, especially in EDH where you get a free one. If you do the math looking at mulligans, you get to look at up to 14 cards and keep 7 of them when you're playing EDH between your first 2 mulligans. And then you also have another card in your command zone as your commander, so you've already got an extra card there. If you were to even mull to 6, you're still at 7. And then you get to immediately draw on your first turn, which is the most broken part of EDH, is that everyone gets to draw on their first draw step. There's just so many reasons to take extra looks at your mulligans to get like a really good and keepable hand in EDH. And there are very few ways to punish it, really.
You get so many looks, and it's free.
Yeah, and people don't generally play like Thoughtseize effects or things like that, because it's just not effective in a 3v1 format, you know? If I'm going down a card to put you down a card, what does it really do for the rest of the table? It just puts your other 2 opponents up a card, basically. It's just not a very good exchange fighting on that kind of an axis. So yeah, like going down to 6 or going down to 5, if you go down to 5 and you have just a single commander, you're still going to have your single commander and your draw and still be at 7 cards in your first main phase on turn 1.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Especially if you're in like CDH, if you're playing like Rogue Rack something, so you just
you don't even need a land.
Free.
You just put him out there.
Free
commander.
Roger. Yeah.
I think that's a part of the question of like, why do you want a mulligan too? Or like, I know that people's priorities are very different between CDH and EDH in why they choose to play certain things, especially your commander, where in CDH a big part of it is having a commander that draws cards or somehow acts as card advantage. It's always inherently card advantage because it is a card that's essentially in your hand that you get to cast. But in casual EDH, I think far more often people will still have a commander that makes either tokens or some sort of card draw or card advantage like that. And that's just always something to think about, is that like if you have anything that makes extra cards or makes pseudo card advantage in your command zone, that's always something to like help play to.
Yeah, because I feel like in a casual format, you have your commander, and your commander is basing like the whole theme of your deck. I'm playing this, so this is what I'm going to do. And we're just going to do, you know, come what may, the cards will come. Whereas in like CEDH, it's really what colors do you want to play and what commanders give you the best of the best in those colors. Because I mean, how many decks do realistically require you to cast your commander in CEDH to actually win? Like, not really.
The most popular one at the moment is Tivit, but they're sort of few and far between, right? Like Najila is another one. But the like soup decks, as they're called, like 4-color soup decks like Timna and Crom and stuff like that, don't need their commanders to win. Their commanders are just very good cards. They like fit that definition like I was talking about before of providing card advantage. So it's just that's a thing that you would mulligan towards in CEDH. A reason why you would want to mulligan in a more aggressive environment is I'm trying to look for a really good card of hands. If I can't get a really good card of hands that goes exactly towards my combo in my CEDH deck, I can still just try to mulligan towards the Jeweled Lotus and cast my Crom on turn 1.
Or get Timna down, something like that, so you automatically then are kind of ahead, so you can, you know, your opponents don't cast a creature or something, then you're getting in with Timna, you're drawing cards. doesn't even matter that you even mulliganed at that
Exactly,
point. You
yeah.
know?
Right. Because it's like you're making up for it,
Right.
kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I guess that kind of rolls into our next question, which is, what is it that you what are you looking for in an opening hand? What do you want your opening hand to be able to do? And I know, you know, like in CDH, I feel like that answer, we've kind of already answered it, where you want to either go as fast as possible to get to your main goal, or have the pieces in order to get there, right? Like you want to make sure that you've got the wheels on your bus. But I feel like for casual commander, and especially in 2-player formats, I feel like the what you're looking for can be very different. And this isn't exactly like a question of like, depending on what you're playing, these exact things, but like what's the overall vibe of what a keepable opening hand should be?
Yeah, like you said, it looks very different in different environments. Like we've been talking about in terms of casual EDH mostly. So in terms of casual EDH, my personal like rule of thumb is, can my hand cast a rampant growth on turn 2, which is just in my mind any spell that costs 2 mana that ramps you 1 is a rampant growth. So like your signets and talismans of the world, as well as actual rampant growth. I just like a hand that can make mana. I tend to like commanders that can dirtle and draw cards anyway in casual EDH. So usually making mana is enough for me. But to go back to what I said before, I think the best thing to do is to have a coherent game plan. For me, generally, that's just making mana and trying to draw cards. It looks very different for different kinds of decks, and in different formats as well. Like we said, if we were playing 1v1 formats, we're talking about maybe sitting down and playing standard or modern or something like that. If you are game 1 in the blind, don't know what your opponent is playing, there's no way that you can sort of plan your hand around what your opponent might be playing to try to mulligan to their best cards. So you just want a hand that looks like it can play a coherent game plan, that looks like it gets you towards where you want to be going with your deck.
This is kind of like a convoluted question, but when you're looking at your opening hand, right? And let's say we'll just use commander as an example because you get that free 7. When you're looking at your hand to determine your mulligans, does the number of cards that you will eventually end up with change the criteria of a good hand, in your opinion?
End up with, in what way do you mean?
So like if you pull your second 7, right? And you're like, I'd rather go to 6. Once you pull your next hand that will be a multi 6, does what you're looking for or what you're willing to take change because you're going to end up with 6 cards in your hand rather than 7, and so on and so forth? Does that, I don't know if I answered that correctly.
Totally get. To go back to the example that I used before, where you can like transition your mulligan plan if you're playing Timna and Crom to like try to get out your Crom if you have to mulligan real low. At a certain point, your priorities are changing. With your first or second 7, you're looking for like your ideal game plan. To use the like CDH as the very extreme and sort of like more clear cut of what I can tell you specifically you would be looking for is like in most CDH decks on turn 1 or 2, you want to cast a Ristic Study because that's just one of the best cards in the game. Once you start getting down to 6, you're like, okay, if I can ramp out a card advantage engine, that's really good. If I have to make a sort of mid-range turn 2 to 3 game plan, I can sort of do that. Once you start mulliganing to say 5 or 4, that's when you're in a much very different mindset of, okay, I'm looking for a land and a Mana Crypt and Ristic Study, or I'm looking for a land and a Jeweled Lotus so I can play my commander on turn 1. And you're pretty much not looking for anything else at that point. To explain to you why I would ever go down to mulligan to 2 and 1. Once you get to a certain point, you're looking for very specific things, and if you can't find them, you just have to dig deeper and just trust that the deck will provide.
and the deck will provide, yes.
Hopefully.
But that makes sense, right? You're with a smaller starting hand size, and you're decreasing your options. You know, if you're starting with 7 cards in your hand, you have some flexibility. If you're starting with 5 cards in your hand, you have to make sure that those 5 are doing what you need to do. So it makes sense that what you're looking for when you're pulling your first 7 and when you're going to 4 might be different, because you might just be looking for the overall vibe at 7, but at 4 it's like I need this card specifically, this card specifically, and probably this color or of land or something.
Yeah, like the main
lines.
problem at being at 4 is obviously that you have far fewer cards than the rest of the table. So to give like a very concrete example, like you would never want to keep in CDH a turn or a first or second 7 that just casts a turn 1 Wheel of Fortune, because you're not gaining very much by doing that. You're essentially giving up more cards by discarding them and putting them in the graveyard than you are gaining advantage by putting down more mana rocks on the table or something, for instance. But if you're going down to 4, you've basically got nothing left to lose, right? If you discard 2 cards that you probably couldn't cast anyway to get a turn 1 Wheel of Fortune out and then draw 7 more cards, you put yourself back into like like God's perfect Garden of Eden with your 7 cards.
Right.
Because you're only getting rid of 1, maybe 2, rather than the whole lot.
You're still giving your opponents all those cards, but you're giving yourself more cards in that scenario, as opposed to like doing it from 7.
Well, that and 2, like you could be like messing with what they're doing,
right?
So if
and it's also like a good seat order like conversation, was like your seat 1 and then you mold the 4 and your mana crypt land Wheel of Fortune something else.
That sounds great.
Then you're just like, oh yeah, this is great.
Much more devastating than doing it in the 4th seat when your opponents have played their Ragavans, etc., and like gotten themselves a little bit set up. But you know, if you're in 4th seat, you mold a 4, you do what you got to do.
When you're in a 2-player format, is there really an advantage or a disadvantage in going second? Because in 2-player, if you go first, you don't get to draw the card. So does that not getting to draw that kind of add into your mulligan math, so to say?
It does, for sure. I would say right now, one of the hardest things in I'm going to say modern, for example, because it's the format that I love and play, is the Rakdos scam decks. It feels abysmal to ever have to mulligan against that deck. I had to mull to 5 one game, and my opponent played Gemstone Caverns because they weren't going first.
Yeah.
And I played lands Delighted Halfling Go, and he went Thoughtseize, Grief, Feign Death. So I just had no cards in my hand. So it's just something that in the 2-player formats, that's like you have to really sit and think when you're going down cards.
These could be lost
because it's just
ether.
like
absolutely.
Like, these things could just be gone in a matter of seconds.
The disparity of not getting that first card draw is absolutely huge, and something that like Magic has tried to remedy. With nothing concrete, but it's like a recognized problem that there's a huge disparity between going first and taking the draw. But yeah, if you think about 1v1 formats like with Thoughtseize in Legacy, a big problem is cards like Force of Will or Daze. Force of Will, you can pitch a blue card from your hand and pay a life to cast a counter spell for free. Daze counters a spell unless your opponent pays 1, and you can cast it alternatively, besides paying its mana cost, by returning an island you control to your hand. So if your opponent is on the play and they have like their Thoughtseizes, for instance, they'll be able to strip your Dazes if you don't have a Force of Will to protect it, and like very subtle tempo differences like that can determine the entire game.
2-player sounds hard.
It's really hard, yeah. The disparity, like the resource disparity that happens between 1v1 versus EDH, where you're playing either like 3v1 if you're in a CDH scenario, or like free-for-all. It's very different. The economy of cards becomes extremely different.
Would you say that your opponent's choosing to mulligan or not in like a 1v1 scenario, or in a commander scenario, how far down they go? Is that valuable information? And if so, like what do you do with it? Because I think my question is, like, if I'm playing 1v1 and I'm at 5 and they're at 7, is that giving me any information, or is trying to determine, who's going first and what the seat order is in a 4-player game kind of thing? Is the number of cards that they're going to start with vital and something I should pay more attention to?
All known information will help you play the game of Magic better. What kind of information that gives you can be very different depending on the context. One thing I really don't like about CEDH when you play just like among people, because I'm a real stickler for the rules, is you were supposed to mulligan in turn order among your 4 players. So you decide your turn order, Player 1 decides whether or not they're going to keep their first 7. They get to mulligan, and then the next player does it, so on and so forth, until everyone is ready and keeps their opening hand. That rarely ever happens. Everyone just mults at the same time and talks shit during it. There are a lot of scenarios where you can be sculpting your game plan based on the amount of cards that your opponents have kept. Obviously, you don't get to know what they are. And again, the context changes a lot depending on what format you're in or how aggressively you and your friends are playing. Say in a 1v1 format, if I'm sitting down with someone playing Modern, if we are sitting down and mulliganing, if they mull down to like 5 or all right, so let's say this, if they mulligan down to 6, I'm going to think to myself, oh, that sucks. If they mulligan down to 5, I'm like, oof. If they mulligan down to 4, I'm like, oh, this person is playing Tron and I'm going to get housed right now. So like, that's the thing that you can think about. If you're a Thoughtseize deck, like we were saying before, that's something that's blood in the water for you. If your opponent goes to 5, like if you look at your first 7, if you're like on the draw, for example, your opponent mulligans down to 6, you see your first hand has got a Thoughtseize, and you're like, well, I'm going to snap keep. I'm sending you to 5. You're going to the Shadow Realm.
Man, Magic is so hard.
Why
does anybody play
there's so
this
many
game?
nuances, because I really love those little like tells and like pieces of advantage that you can get like that. Those subtle nuances of Magic are very, very fun to me.
Well, and it's like it's fun, but then at the same time, when you look at it through the lens of a newer player, it's fun, but it's also scary because
it's information overload.
It really is. And if you're sitting down with someone who has even the tiniest schmeckle more experience than you, them having that free information that is just kind of available could help them make different decisions. And you're just like, I have lands and spells on a curve. This is great. I think I can play this game. This seems all right. And they're like, well, based on the number of cards that you've kept and the face that you made, and I saw in the reflection of your glasses that I think you're playing this color, and I bet you're doing this. And
I totally get that. If you're at F&M and there's money on the line, the sharks are out there and they're going to be on you like that. But again, it's about context. If you're just like hanging out with your friends, like that's not a thing that I'm truly considering if I'm just sitting down and playing casual Magic, because like it's just not a thing that matters. Again, if you are like brand new to Magic and you're watching this and trying to figure out like how important is mulliganing, most of the things that we've talked about are kind of like next level theory things in Magic. Mulligans are not super important. I think the core of what we've said that is really important to like take away from all this is keep a hand that has a coherent game plan. If there's nothing else that you take away from this, just like take away that. That's a very simple and actionable piece of advice that I can give to you that will make your games better. Other than that, like these are all other things that you can think about and all things that will add to your ability to play Magic and your ability to play Magic against other people. But are they the most important, like necessary things to keep in mind while you're learning and getting back into Magic? Not necessarily. But yeah, keep an opening hand that looks coherent, has a game plan is like the best piece of actionable advice.
Don't keep 3 lands and 4 5+ mana spells. Got it.
Hopes and dreams don't pay the bills. Another way to think about it is the reason why we play Magic is because casting Magic spells is awesome. And if your hand can't cast Magic spells, that is not awesome.
It's so true.
I'm in shock because it's like that's so obvious, right?
It's
like
very
it's just kind
simple,
of like
but
a
yeah.
duh, but also like pop off, Bessie. You are so right.
It is a very simple idea, but it's something that I don't know, people love to have hopes and dreams, which we all should.
Yes.
But you don't need to in your opening hand. You can mulligan. You get a free one.
I think in an opening hand, especially in casual Commander, I'm looking for at least 4 lands and a ramp
I love
spell,
a good 4-lander. Yeah.
and then like maybe 4 and 5 drop.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm looking for in most of my hands.
Legacy is an extremely powerful Magic format, but one that like really harps on the fundamentals of Magic. And one thing that I've really learned from hanging out with Legacy players and watching them play Magic is that casting spells is good and playing lands is awesome and the most powerful thing that you can do. If you can make land drops, you're always going to be ahead of people who can't make land drops.
So true, Bestie.
Casting spells is cool. I love doing it.
It's real Shadow Money Wizard Gang hours. Shadow Wizard Money.
Shadow Wizard Money Game.
We love casting spells. So is there a too low? Is there a floor to this? I mean, maybe you're not the right person to ask because you've won games of CEDH.
No, I'm not going to tell anyone to mull down to 1. Like, I would, if there's money on the line, I'm never going to mull down to 1. I'll pick a reasonable 3 if we really have to, but I wouldn't even want to go that low. But if you're hanging out and bullshitting with your friends, mulling to 1 is fine because you get the story out of it. Even if I didn't win that game, I still get to say that I did it.
Right.
But realistically, context is everything. If you're hanging out with your buddies and playing some beer and pretzel casual EDH and you're trying to go to turn 8 and knock people with a big 7/7 for 7, keep a keepable and like playable hand. You don't need to mulligan super aggressively. If you have, I don't know, if you're a combo deck, if you have a specific thing you're looking for, that's what the mulligan rule is for. It's for looking for the spells that you need. So it's something to consider. Do you need to mulligan past 6 probably most of the time? I doubt it. I'll go to 5 in casual EDH because I got burned on my 6 because like I'll get greedy, look at a first 7, be like, no, that's crap. Look at a second 7. Oh, I could do better than that. Go down to 6. Oh, that was worse than either of the 7s. So now I'm down to 5. But it is what it is. Being at 5 is fine. Again, you still have your commander. You still get your first draw. You're still at 7. Going down lower than 5 is where things start to get really stinky. But 5 is a lot of Magic cards.
Yeah,
it is.
And that 5 better be like.
It's got to be good. Exactly. Yeah, it's got to be good.
The nuts. I think. Would you? This is an off-topic question, but would you take a mold of 5 that's like the fucking nuts, perfectly sculpted from the heavens, or a mid second 7?
Oh my god, good 5 over a medium 7 any day of the week.
Yeah, I was gonna say
absolutely any day. In the context of CDH.
Yeah.
If we're like, again, one of the tenets of Legacy, don't mulligan. Keeping 7 cards is goated. In CEDH, if you're trying to be explosive, you're trying to do good stuff quickly and early, this probably doesn't apply to most people like trying to get into Magic and stuff, but yeah, good 5 over a mid 7 any day.
I've learned so many things.
I love mulligan so much.
And you make it so easy. I thought that this was going to be a much harder thing to like grasp.
I'm in the middle of doing a video about why like cantrips aren't good enough for CEDH. So I've been like re-going over all of my like mulligans is a big part of one of the reasons why, in my opinion. I recognize that mulligans can be like a kind of awkward and almost scary thing to practice because you're like fully in it, right? Like once you've made your decision for your mulligan, you have to play out that game. But doing it is fun, and the more you do it, the more you'll like understand the way that your deck works, and the more that you'll understand how you can mulligan effectively. Mulliganing well really relies on knowing how your deck works. My advice would be to practice your mulligans with the deck that you know the best, that has like the most cards that you can really like recall just off the top of your head, that has a really coherent game plan that I'm trying to do XYZ thing. Those will be the easiest ways you can practice mulliganing and have good results, and then train you how to do it in more extreme scenarios.
At least in my head, is the steps are like, I have built a deck and then I'm gonna practice playing it to see if there's any like cuts or changes that need to be made. And then once I've figured out that the deck is the way that I think it should be, then I need to figure out how do I get there.
I'm gonna do test hands.
Yeah.
Do mulligans.
How can I get to where I need to go?
Try and learn it more
effectively. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show and being here with us. Philly to Kansas. That's you made a super far trip.
Boy, are my arms tired.
What would you like to share about yourself? What would you like to plug? Tell us all the things, where people can find you, what you do, and all of that.
Yeah, I'm Dan, moderately on MTG. You can find me on Twitch and on YouTube. On Twitch, I stream a lot of CEDH and sometimes some other constructed formats like Legacy and Vintage, and a little bit of Limited as well. If you like CEDH, if you like some of the like higher theory things that we were talking about today, I have a really in-depth guide on how to mulligan in CEDH on my own YouTube channel, as well as a bunch of really awesome CEDH gameplay. So yeah, if you're interested in CEDH, if you're interested in like the fundamentals of how to play it and stuff like that, I have a lot of really cool theory videos and have a lot of really cool gameplay episodes. So go check it out.
Awesome. Thank you again so much.
Yes,
thank you for having me. This was super fun. As I said many times, mulligans are my favorite thing in Magic, and I could talk about them ad nauseum.
Well, that's a magic card.
Magic joke.
We're so clever and funny and topical. Look at us. Maybe is that what the basic land game is?
No, we're not
Lumir?
allowed to make content about that.
What if we just made the craziest?
Damn it.
I'm so
Bless-
sorry.
Bless you.
Is that what Ryan is saying in Playing with Power videos?
The London Mulligan, I'm sure.
You know
Yeah,
how like
he-
he shows
he
the card
says-
and the and,
Oh yeah, the
is
London
this-
Mulligan is the
London
card that you put on
Mulligan.
bottom.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
he was saying and the lonely mulligan.
No, it's London.
That's really funny.
That was so loud, son. Why you squeak like that?
Sorry, I didn't ask if I could swear.
That was perfect. No notes. God damn it, we're good at podcasting.
Easy claps.
Mhm.
You both clapped.
We have like one fucking brain cell that just like.
You both did it instantaneously. It was amazing. I loved it.
But the problem is that sometimes, like, if I ping it, he doesn't pong it, and then I'm stuck with no brain cell. We would love to send you some of our tangerine. Get away from my microphone.
I thought you
sir.
were gonna send me tangerines, and I was hyped. I love fruit, but that
No,
seems so weird.
This is a tangerine.